welcome back to Season 2, Episode 5 of the Powered Up Coaches Show. And this is brought to you, of course, by Sideline Power, your one-stop shop for coaching technology. Well, I tell you, this is a treat, folks. We've got Lincoln East head coach John Gingery, and you're going to learn a lot and you're going to laugh a lot. First off, sustained success. What does it take in 27 years of being a head coach to have sustained success? You're going to hear about that from Coach. And also some of the things he values most from his tenure in coaching. And he'll talk about some letters that he's gotten from previous players and how they have meant the most to him of all the things in his coaching tenure. And lastly, you're going to find out why he was known in 1976 as an assistant coach at Lincoln East as the Great Garusi. Again, be prepared to laugh. He's a great storyteller. Enjoy the show. Well, it is so good to finally meet a guy that's known as the Great Garusi. 1976. We're going to jump into that. A little bit of is that the old day when you were a hypnotist?
Well, there was a lot of magic we were trying to use in those days just to get wins on that side of the column. So yeah, we've done a lot of things.
Oh man, well the Great Garusi. We'll get into that a little bit, but let's start with growing up because you grew up in a great era. Graduated from high school in 1975 from Lincoln East, which is great to be back at your alma mater. But I always am curious what it was like as a kid. A lot of backyard football for you.
A ton in those days. It was backyard football, baseball, basketball, 2 basketballs in the winter. When one would stop dribbling, you'd grab another one so you could go out and keep playing. I feel like it was probably the best time to grow up as a kid in America. I mean, we had the run of the city.
Yeah.
There was always something going on.
Bikes and the whole thing.
Oh, we were everywhere, and it was a great time to be a kid.
Yeah. Well, I got to ask you this. When you're in those backyard football games, and you grew up at a great time as well from an NFL perspective, first off, who were you? Who were you thinking you were when you were playing that sandlot football?
Well, I liked to be Dick Butkus when I was playing defense, and on offense, I was probably Johnny Unitas with a stronger arm. It was one of those deals.
So without a limp, right?
No limp. But there were some great names at that time in the NFL, and it was a different time. But we had some great contests.
Oh, I love it. And a lot of guys participating in the neighborhood.
We had a lot of guys, and what was crazy about our neighborhood is it was kind of a split between East and Northeast at that time. And there was a ton of talent that split and went both ways. And, a lot of the talent that I wound up with won a number of state championships.
Yeah, so give me some names of some
guys.
Well,
Gordon Thiessen was one at the university, and John Selko went on and played at the university, and Carl Voss was a freak. Sam Yowell was an amazing back. Dave Waters, Bill Holmes.
And this is your Sandlot group.
Yeah, this is kids that you just played with all the time, and it was unbelievable how much talent there was there.
Yeah. I don't know what it is, Coach, but here's the thing. We think back to the NFL, and guys were playing on baseball fields with dirt. You'd see grass, then all of a sudden at the 40, they're on dirt. They played for very little money back in the day. They lost their teeth, and yet we loved it. We loved it. So what was it about those early NFL days that drew you to it, or were you not an NFL fan?
Well, I think it was probably just the competition and the names and the people that played in those contests. I mean, one of my high school football coaches, Lyle Sittler, was all Big Six center, played with Butkus and Gale Serras in the All-American Bowl. And he told stories about those guys at that time. So, I mean, the connection goes way back to some of those great names, and he tells stories of those guys. It was pretty incredible that he had contact because, those are guys that were out there,
Yeah.
So it was pretty interesting. And the NFL was a blood and guts thing in those days.
Yeah.
And great story is Bob Newton, who played in Nebraska, All-American, played 16 years in the NFL with Seattle and Chicago, came back and coached for me 1 year. And I'm telling you, our locker room, we'd sit around and listen to him tell stories until 7, 8 o'clock at night after practice, just from what happened in the NFL and the names that he threw out. Incredible stuff.
Yeah. When you think about it, was there anyone that hit harder than Butkus?
Well, Ray Nitschke was one of those guys, was another one that brought the hammer. But, there was some great names. Jack Tatum in the secondary. Those were, Willie Lanier. There was some players in the NFL that were just unbelievably talented.
So who was your team? Who'd you follow as a
The
kid?
Chiefs.
Oh, you were Kansas City before. Was Dawson
1967
still
when they
playing?
won
Oh,
with
yeah.
Dawson and
All right.
Taylor. And I could name everybody on defense at that time. I mean, they were unbelievable, and we loved the Chiefs at those times, and also the Colts.
Yeah.
Those were the two teams probably that jumped out the most.
So you taking Mahomes over Dawson or Dawson over Mahomes?
I tell you what, Mahomes is pretty tough to beat, though, isn't he? I mean,
Yes, he is.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know, probably Mahomes.
Yeah. You talk about freaks. That guy knows how to win. There's
He
no
does.
doubt about it. What did you like about football? I mean, what do you remember you really like? Was it the contact? Was it being with your buddy? What was
I
it?
think it was the physicality in those days. It was just the rough and tumble, that stuff that was just, young boys growing up, that the physicality, just, the punching guys and all that stuff that went along with it. I think that was the biggest thing is just getting out and doing it.
Yeah.
That was the best part.
I love that the group you had. I mean, look, it's one thing to have backyard football games. It's another with the group that you had. You had some all-stars. You had some all-staters. Did it ever get to the point where through a few punches thrown?
Oh, always, always. I mean, when you're with a group like that and it's that competitive, there's tempers and you want to win, and it got a little physical on the other side sometimes too. So, yeah, I got popped in the mouth a few times, and I'm sure I gave my share. So, yeah, it happened.
That's how you settled it back in
That's
those
what you
days,
did.
right?
And you walked away. It was over. Said, all right, let's go. Let's go get a Coke.
That's right.
So,
well, Coach, listen, we always hear about mentors, right? That coached you and played a part in your athletic life. I want you to think back to who was someone that had a huge influence on you as a kid that wasn't a coach.
well, if I go all the way back, Mr. Van Vlack was a PE teacher, but he was also a coach, but not at our school.
Mm-hmm.
And he was my PE teacher in elementary school. And he was the initial that had a great impact on me and my athletics when I was young in elementary school. I remember we had a day where we just had games and competition. And I was running a 200 or whatever it was. I don't even remember, but I was getting beat by somebody and I quit. He chased me down and laid into me and said, I don't care if you're dead last, you never quit a race. You finish. And I got back out and ran that race by myself because it meant that much to me. But he was tough on me too. I mean, he wouldn't pull any punches on me. He called me Ding Ding. I don't know if that had any indication of my intelligence or not, but Ding Ding, get back there and run it again. And if I did something wrong, he was first one to let me have it. So that was the first person that had a big impact on me in my athletics.
Don't you think that kids are looking for that? I mean, here's a guy that was tough, probably occasionally said some good things, but maybe really drove you and was tough, but yet you were looking for that, it sounds like.
No, without a doubt. And kids are still looking for that today.
Mm-hmm.
They want somebody to tell them, I was, going to be a few minutes late here because I had to land on my boys at camp today. I said, I don't want to do this, but I care. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it the right way. So without a doubt, and they respond to that. And I think the biggest thing is they know if you love them, they respect that. And I knew he loved me. I mean, he loved me enough to tell me I was wrong, I was right. It's the same thing with kids today. I can chew them out one side and down the other, but I got to finish with, what, I love you, and I'm not going to let you get away with that. And they understand, they respond to that. They still want that.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest part of it.
Yeah. It sounds like at that point, were you starting to get the itch to coach? When did you know? When you were a kid? Were you, in fact, you've got an interesting story about wanting to coach or maybe not wanting to coach. So when did it hit you?
It probably, when I got done playing, I wanted to stay a part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was probably when I knew that I enjoyed it that much that I wanted to make it a part of my life. I wasn't crazy about teaching. I didn't know that I wanted to be a teacher. So, I don't want to be with those savages all day long and then go coach. But I think it was at that time probably in college, when I made that decision, then I said, I kind of enjoy the coaching aspect and that part of it, the game planning and all those things go into it. So it was probably about my junior year of college that I decided that was the route I wanted to pursue.
Mm-hmm. But you had a little detour. because you came out, and a lot of folks, they graduate, they get that assistant coaching job, and away they go. But you took a little detour along the
I
way.
did. Well, I coached the last couple of years of college, and that's where I kind of had the itch. But then right out of college when I graduated, I said, I really don't want to get in a classroom. And so had the opportunity to go and pick up a GA at South Dakota and was offered that and had the opportunity to jump right into college coaching at that time. But at that time then I made a decision. I was single, and I knew a lot of the stories of the guys that have been in that profession already that had made some struggles, been fired a couple times, and a couple of young guys been divorced already. And I said, if I have a family, I really don't want to be bouncing all over the country. And I wasn't engaged at that time, and so, but kind of made that decision. Said, well, you know what? Got engaged and said, well, I better get a head coaching job someplace because I guess that's what I want to do. But I went into business for a while, for the first year right out of college, because I didn't want to do it. And I was doing some broadcasting. I was doing high school color commentary at that time.
I love it. Who was that for? Was it radio?
KFOR. Yeah, it was with KFOR. Larry Mullenbrink and did some with Chuck Stevens. And so was doing that, but was working for a heavy company. Started a brand new company. And you take jobs so you find out what you don't want to do in life. And so I did that for a year. And then I said, hey, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And so got engaged and said, I better apply for some jobs, and started applying for some jobs and wound up at Weimar, Nebraska.
Yeah. So small town. Before you get to Lincoln East, you start in a small community. What did you learn from that experience? First off, what was a small town coaching opportunity like, and how different was it from a big school?
Head and shoulders difference. The biggest, we were a biggest C1 school at that time, so we were almost Class B. Gosh, there's so many things. There's so many variations, some other things. When I took that job, they had the longest losing streak in the state. And that was the article in the paper. Gingery takes, I think they had a 3-year losing streak. And those kids were beat up. It was a economically depressed area. And so about 50% were from free and reduced lunch, and 50% were from split homes. And so it was a rough bunch, but it was one of the greatest things I ever did. I'm still in contact with a lot of those guys today. But the first thing I told them when I took that job, we're breaking the streak. We're winners. We're going to break this streak. We're not going to carry this on, and it's going to end. And we beat Tecumseh, and I could have been mayor of Weimar at that time. I mean, I was that was a big deal. We
because
won that
of
game.
beating Tecumseh,
Because
right?
beating Tecumseh, we broke that losing streak, and so that changed everything.
Yeah. When you think back to that and knowing you're walking into a program that has not seen success in a long time, thinking back to what you had to do to turn it and the game plan you had in place in your mind, what was it?
It's just a belief in what you do and a belief in each other. The team aspect. We need 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, 11 guys on special teams. Everybody has a job. In a practice, everybody has a job to do, and we need each other. And if we can pull this thing off, it's going to be because we're together on this thing, and it's not because we don't have the ability. We do, and we just got to turn it around, and we got to get it done.
Yeah, well, it's one thing to say that, Coach, but how do you implement it? Because there's a lot of coaches that watch this show, right? And they're walking in. There's some coaches walking into a program that hasn't been successful in some time. So how do you get that buy-in? What are some of the things that you make
it's
sure
baby steps. It's baby steps, and you got to build an offense around the talent that you have. And a defense has got to be the same thing, and you can't be afraid to take chances. And we brought the heat on defense. We got after people. And on offense, we built it around the things that we could do well. The play action passes, the run game that we could establish, and it was baby steps, little by little. And then once we got to that point and you got over the hump, then we could compete. And that was the toughest conference in Nebraska at that time with Milford, Tri-County, Wilbur, Sandy Creek was on the other side, Centennial. And the crazy part is all those schools are 8-man football now. That's just unbelievable to me.
Why do you think that is? Is it just population drift away from these towns?
It is. I mean, when I was a kid, everybody's grandparents were on the farm. Everybody's.
Yeah.
We grew up, my parents grew up on a farm, and nowadays nobody. That's not there anymore. The rural aspect is gone. And so that's the biggest thing is that people aren't living in small towns anymore. They're in the big cities.
Yeah. What do we lose when we lose that rural aspect?
Oh gosh, there's so much you lose when you do lose that. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just a love for the land, a work ethic. Jiminy Christmas, if you haven't thrown hay, you haven't lived yet. all those things, and work cattle. I mean, I think about those things that I did as a kid was just pretty darn special.
Yeah.
That I got to learn that young. That it's hard work.
What was something you loved about being on the farm? When you think back, I know there were a lot of chores, but what were a couple things that you loved about it?
Well, the biggest thing was the space and the freedom.
Yeah.
You could do whatever you wanted to do, and you didn't have to worry about anyone looking over your shoulder. And it was special because when you spent time with the grandparents, they knew what it was all about. I mean, they shoot. My grandma told me during the Depression that when the gypsies, people that were traveling at that time during the 20s, said when they came and wanted to stay in your barn overnight, if you let them stay in your barn, nothing would disappear. But if you said no, you'd lose a chicken or a hog or something. And I said, shut up, Grandma, that's not true. She's like, oh, that's a true story. He said people would travel because they didn't have jobs and they were looking. And if they came through and needed a place to stay and you could put them up and even possibly feed them, and send them on their way, you helped. It was a good part of, being a Christian brother, sister to somebody else.
Right.
Pretty crazy, a lot of those stories that people never hear about these days.
I love those stories. Yeah, I heard a few from my grandmother as well. What did you not like about being on the farm?
Well, probably the work.
Yeah, I was going to say, come on, give me
telling you.
something here.
Geez, one of my uncles would tell me, you're never going to herd hogs in a ditch, Johnny, because you're so bull-legged now that you can't stop them. We got to get more of these weeds out of the field. We got to get this hay up because it's going to rain. Got to get in the barn.
And the days started early, didn't they?
Oh yeah, it started really early, and it ended late.
Yeah.
But it was a good way of life.
Yeah, absolutely it was. I tell you what, when I ask what do we lose when we lose that rural life, right? I used to work with a man who was always like, I need someone who has worked on a farm. And I said, finally, well, there are a lot less farms today than there were 30 years ago. And so what he was looking for, right? That work
without a
ethic
doubt,
and
that work ethic. And I still hear that from college coaches that recruit. They still like to recruit the Midwest because that work ethic is still there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just different.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I tell you what, let's go back to the Great Garusi because, again, it was 1976. I read about this. I got to know the story. You were some infamous hypnotist, and what were you trying to do here? And could you really hypnotize people?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it was one of those deals, and we were trying to find ways where we could motivate kids to get wins. And so the Great Garusi came out and he had a plan that was going to be successful. If you just followed it, you believed it, you watched the watch, you bought into it, we could win games. I know another time we came in with on a motorcycle at practice and rode through practice in the colors of the team we're going to play. And we got dogpiled by about 40 kids, and I think I broke a rib in one of those episodes. But I mean, it was the things that you try to do to motivate, to whatever it takes. And it was a different time then, but I don't know. I was young. I could do that then. I could do that and get away with it.
You could put up with a broken rib back then.
I could.
Well, I love that. And that's when you were an assistant coach at East.
Yeah.
But you get a chance to become the head coach. Walk me through the steps that happened there to go back to your alma mater and lead that program.
Well, it was, when I was at Wymore, they called me and said, there's a position at Eastside, we'd like to have you apply for it. And so I did. Doc Sahlstrom called me and I applied for it, and Coach Zenek was a head coach and said, I want you to apply for this. And I did, and they offered me, and I had to go out in the field and get the board president off his tractor to release me from my contract so I could accept that job, which was just crazy. So
how was he about that, by the way?
He was really good about it. He was gracious. He said, we don't want to stop anybody from improving and getting better. And he said, we'll grant that and let you go. And that was awesome that he did that. And came back, was assistant coach at East High for a few years under Lee Zenek. In those guys, I learned from my mentors. Those are the guys that coached me in high school, and then I got to coach with them, which is pretty incredible, and it's a great group of coaches. And then I guess about 1996, I guess, Leroy decided to step down, and then I went through that whole process of the interviewing, and there was a lot of people that wanted that job because at that time it was a pretty big job in a big school, and was fortunate enough to land that job, and I guess it just took off from there.
Why do you think they hired you? What stood out about you that they liked and they wanted?
I guess maybe a passion and a love for the game and love for
Mm-hmm.
the kids was probably one of the things that maybe that jumped out at him. I don't know. I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell you for sure, but Randy Bates was the AD at that time, and I said we're going to get back to where we were. That's what I want to do. I mean, I understand there's a culture at this school that's different from other places, and we have a family culture, and I built on that. And I said we're going to bring that back in all sports and try and recreate some of the things that went on in the 70s when we were doing the most damage.
Mm-hmm.
And supporting everybody in all the programs, and that was one of the biggest things that I think we've accomplished. Is it's a family all the way around with all our sports, and that's what makes us different. It's not about wins and losses; it's about success of the old program. And in the last 3 years, we've been fortunate enough to win the All Sports Award from the NSAA. It's because of the success of all our programs.
Now, that's another question I've got to ask that I think so many coaches can learn from, and that is, how do you get everyone involved? Sometimes coaches become competitive, right?
Oh,
I don't want my basketball players spending too much time on baseball, et cetera, or football. How do you get that buy-in when you have those competing interests like that?
well, you've got to get everybody's ego in check. And I know when I came back, there was a big divide, and we didn't have that support because two of the big head coaches were at odds.
Mm-hmm.
And so certain kids didn't do certain sports, and that kills you. And so we said, you got to go and support other coaches. Go to their contests. You get to know their kids. You get to know them, and they got to get to know you. And it's honesty and all the things that go along with it. And they appreciate those little things that you do. I mean, that you show up at somebody's freshman game and you go, you came to our freshman game. I said, hey, it's important, and so the process of building those relationships, even on staff, is pretty critical to success all the way through your building.
Yeah, it's fun to see it in Nebraska too. Matt Rule has kind of been.
He's doing it.
That, right?
He is. He's bringing that back, and that's what you got to have. I mean, you've got to have that love for everybody in your program, and that makes everybody better.
Mm-hmm. Coach, you mentioned the 70s, glory time. 1979, you guys went to the semifinals, and then you get in, and boy, you start winning. But I want to specifically, there's a lot of years we could talk about. I want to specifically talk about 2016 because you guys go to the semifinals that year. And was that a season for you when you look back that says this was kind of, when you think about it, that was the year, or were there other years that were bigger catalysts than 2016?
Well, probably the biggest year, the best coaching job that I've ever done was the year Brady Barron got hurt. And we had that critical injury, and we went through all that whole process, and everybody was scared to death. And I think we lost 5 starters that season, the season-ending injuries. And when you lose 5 of your best players, all of a sudden you're not very good. So we were limping through the season, and we were 0-8 going into our last game. And I mean, after that, we had to go back to basic form tackling and meetings and just fundamentals every day because kids were scared.
Mm-hmm.
And we won our last game, and then that kind of flipped. And the next year, I think we went 8-1 or 8-2 with Jimmy Epke and those guys. And then when we got to 2016, we kind of figured out that some of the things that we were doing early were not having the kind of success. And once we hit the playoffs and we changed our offense a little bit, it just all came to light. And I think, if we'd have won, and we could have won, we beat Burke, who was number 2 in the state, and then we beat Southeast. We're playing Omaha North, and we fumble a kickoff, and that kind of changed the whole complexion. But if we beat Omaha North, we're into the finals and have a shot. So, you get smarter as you get older. And so the things that were working, we just focused on those things only and repped those things offensively and defensively and played to our strengths.
So how, for a typical coach here who, again, is learning, trying to pick up lessons here, it's hard to go back and look at those things that aren't working. Is that something, how do you encourage a coach to say, look, have the courage to go and do this because it's going to help you?
Yeah, you can't be afraid if it's not working, and it's not working, and you can't be afraid to change things, even if it's midstream, and do it a little at a time and say, we got to change this. And one of the things that we did was we went to an unbalanced offense for us. And obviously, we had Chris Walker, who just finished at Montana and was going to get a shot in the NFL. And we had Carson Walters at quarterback, Noah Walters' older brother, and we had some good running backs. And we took the kids we had and put them in positions where they could be the most successful, and it worked for us. And so, it's finding an offense and finding a defense that fits your personnel. Now, everybody wants to say, you know what, this is my defense and I'm doing this, or
Right.
this is my offense. But the problem is, I would love to be 3 yards or 4 yards in a cloud of dust. Ain't going to happen at my school. I don't have those linemen. I usually don't have that kind of running back that I could do that. But, and Chuck Mazursky, who's one of the most successful coaches ever, had just talent out the wazoo. And all he had to do was run ISO and pitch and counter and play action passes. And he'll be the first one to tell you he had great talent. And you get a lot smarter when you got smart kids, and big kids. So you got to do the things that basically fit what your personnel is. It's not always necessarily what you think's the best offense or defense. It's what fits your personnel. And you got to figure that out.
Right. Since you can't bring in, recruits, it's like you've got to deal with what you've got, right? And I think the smaller the school, I look at Ashland Greenwood, and one of the things I love about their coaches there is their offense 5 years ago looked a lot different than it has the last couple of years because of what they've had. But that creativity, but it also makes it difficult, right, Coach? Because you might look a lot different over a span of 4 years.
You do, and it might change, and you just got to be able to accept that and say, this is us now, and this is the personnel we have, and we got to make this go.
Mm-hmm.
And so, last year with Dash Bauman, 1,000-yard rusher, and we had Jeter at quarterback and good receivers. We had great balance, and you can get away with that. But if you don't have somebody like that in the backfield and somebody like that at quarterback, you got to find out things that work for your personnel. Maybe it's a short passing game. Maybe it's more play action passes, and you got to build off those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, when I think about you, one of the things I love, 27th year, right, coming up?
Probably.
Okay.
Hey, Tim, don't ask me that. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Lost
Head coach,
track.
probably.
I hear
probably.
You just know it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
And you have been consistently successful. And here's what I want to know. I don't want to know about how to build a program. I want to know how to sustain a program. How does a coach who says, look, I want to coach for 30 years, how do you sustain it?
I think you've got to surround yourself with good people that believe the same way you believe. I've been fortunate enough that I've had great assistant coaches over the years. One of them still with me, now. Bill Keckley has been with me since I started. He applied for the head job, and when we talked, we said, you know what, if you get it, Billy, I'm staying. And he said, well, if you get it, I'm staying. Well, I got it, and he stayed. Mike Janish was another one that just passed away a couple of years ago. Mike was with me all the time, and Mike said, the biggest thing we got to do is take our kids and coach them up. Mm-hmm. And Mike was an older coach, and he knew we got to coach them up, make the kids we have better. So it's about surrounding yourself with assistants that believe the same kind of things that you believe, and the kids have to believe what you believe. And if they buy in, and we spend a ton of time on fundamentals, because we don't always have the most talented teams, but we can be competitive if we are fundamentally sound.
Mm-hmm. What do you look for in a coach? When you're looking to add to your roster or your staff, what are you looking for in a coach?
I look for somebody that's going to be honest, because my coaches will tell me. I let them tell me, what do you think? I give them a voice, but they got to buy in, and they got to support me the same way, because I've had some coaches that you make a mistake here or there, and all of a sudden you don't have that cohesiveness, and you need to make a change. Mm-hmm. You need to be a head coach. You need to go someplace else. If you're not buying into what we're doing, you're not going to fit here. And so, for the most part, I've surrounded myself with people that believe the same kinds of things that I believe, and they support the things that we want to do. But on the other hand, I let them coach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't jump in and correct things. I'll talk to them afterwards. Say, hey, you might want to try this, and but I don't belittle them in any way. But I let them coach, and that's what they're there for. And I've had a number. Guy Rosenberg was an assistant coach of mine, and he's at Elkhorn South.
Yeah.
He was coming back from Iowa, called me, said, I'm coming back. He said, if I have to volunteer, whatever it is. Well, Elkhorn South was looking for a coach, and I knew the AD, and I called him, and I said, you want to interview this guy right now? Well, the rest is history.
Yeah.
You know, he got that job, and he's an outstanding coach, and I love him to death. I don't like playing him in the playoffs, but
Yeah.
but he's excuse me, does a great job. I mean, and that's what you want. You want people that have the same type of philosophy that you have.
Yeah, and you know when you're going up against Coach Rosenberg that he might quote a little Shakespeare, the English teacher, as the head coach.
He does. He does. He's that way. But.
You know, the other thing I want to do is just run through a few things with you. You know, since you've been doing this for 27 years, I want to know about some of the best conversations you've ever had. First off, with an official. Can you think of a time, a good conversation that you can share with a football official?
Well,
because I got to imagine you've had a few.
I've had a number of them, and I've tried to curb my tongue as I've gotten older, and I have. I don't, it's hard to keep good officials because it's a tough job.
It is.
I mean, so I appreciate the fact that they're doing what they're doing. I can think back on both, basketball and football. Some of the things in football, you just got to approach them non-threatening.
Yeah.
And I get in their ear and I say, you owe me a call now because you blew that one big time because you didn't see it and you threw a flag and you were wrong. And I said, you owe me a call and I'm not going to forget. And I just try and be subtle about it, try and be nice about it. But you know what? You owe me something.
Yeah, Coach, that's not real subtle, by the way.
No, that's not real subtle. But at other times, I guess I got a little heated, and I wound up, and I was about at midfield, and the flag flew in the air, and it said, "Coach, you can't be out." And I looked, and I was at midfield already on a late hit, and it's one of those things, the emotions of a game, and
Sure.
And being the older guy, and I got a lot of young fire assistants that I got to be the cooler head now. When I was defensive coordinator, I was the guy that could be the fireball, but not anymore. So those conversations I try and keep to a minimum. I know in basketball, my first technical foul, I told the basketball official, I said, listen, I'm going to make this easy. He says, when they're bringing the ball up, I'm going to count to 10. When you hear me say 10, you blow the whistle. That means I get the ball back. Boom, there's a technical foul right there. And I said, okay, but now you know what I'm talking about, buddy.
Yeah.
So, I try not to because it is just harder than heck to keep officials. And I don't want officials to have a bad idea of our staff. I want them to say, you know what, that's a good staff. They work together. They do good things where they're not cussing at kids on the sideline. They're not doing things the wrong way. They're doing things the right way. And hopefully that leads to, a well-called game.
Yeah. I'm going to try to tell this story, but I talked to an old retired Division I official, basketball official, and he had officiated a lot of Bobby Knight games. And Indiana was playing someone, I believe it was the Indiana days when Knight was there, and they come out of a timeout and the game's a blowout. Indiana's getting beat bad, and one of Bobby Knight's best players is just following this official around. Ball's on the other side of the court. He's following the official on the other side. Finally, the official's like, hey, he calls the time. He says, Bobby, what's going on? He turns to his kid. He said, kid, what are you doing? And the player says to him, well, Coach Knight said that I got to stand by the guy and guard the guy that's hurting us the most, and that's you. So, anyway, Bobby Knight at least had a little sense of humor.
A little sense of humor, At least he didn't throw a chair at him.
That's right. Well, Coach, how about just give me a great story? 27 years of coaching. A story here you can share. Again, something you can share. It could be a poignant story about a player. It could be just something crazy and fun. But you got to pull one of these out.
Boy, I'm telling you, I should write a book. I mean, there's been so many instances. I probably shouldn't tell some of those stories, but some of the greatest ones probably are locker room stories where we've had kids. They'll stay in the locker room in the shower till 7:00 at night. I got to go in there and chase them out. Go home.
Yeah.
Go home. I mean, it's the bonding. Those guys are in there, and they're sitting around naked just telling stories to get out of the shower. And I said, guys, go home. I want to go home. That was something that when those guys are that close, they spend time together.
Yeah.
There's been instances where we've had kids, which just we had a kid come out one time with a loafer shoe and a football shoe. And it was when Rob Zadiska was playing. And this kid was probably 5'6", 125 pounds. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I lost a shoe. Somebody took my shoe. And he said, I'm calling out Rob Zadiska right now, one-on-one. I said, no, you're not calling out Rob Zadiska. He goes, no, Coach, I am. Puts his mouthpiece and goes, I want him. And so he and Rob did one-on-one Oklahoma drill, and Rob just, launched him, 25 yards in the air, bless his heart. But he said, okay, I'm good now. I'm ready for practice. Yeah, you're good. You're lucky to be alive. Rob's 6'6", 260, and he's 5'6", 150, whatever he was.
One of the greats.
But yeah, one of the greats. I mean, gee, many Christmas. He went on and played in the NFL.
Oh yeah, and a doctor now. If I remember,
doctor.
He could have treated him after he heard it.
Yeah,
so,
he could have. He could have. He's smart enough.
You've had some great years and I imagine that's what you look back when you think of your career. The winning's great, but it's everything I hear from coaches. It's the relationships and those memories of being around your team.
Yeah, that's what it's about. I mean, you go on, and you're thinking, shoot, when Ryan Fitzgerald, who's our offensive line coach right now, when he was young on my staff, I brought him on young. And before games, he'd be in the bathroom just puking his guts out as bad as when he played. He's just in there. And I go, what are you doing? He goes, a little nervous right now. And I said, come on. We got to play a game, and you're in here blowing oats? And so he's better now. He's gotten a lot better.
That's good. That's good to hear.
But that's good to hear. But, that was an every Friday night experience. The thing about a lot of those things, there's games where we've had postponements. Start a game and then rain delay, and then you're off and you come back the next day and finish the game. Those are tough. We played in downpours and we had stoppage of games, and some games we finish at midnight. Some games you come back next day and you are beat up and you got to go back out and play again. And I remember playing Southeast in a downpour, and we stopped that game, and my quarterback, Jimmy Epke, sprained his ankle. I said, gosh, dang it, Jim. And so we warmed up in the gym. We didn't warm up on the field because I didn't want to see how he was moving.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the ball back. It was in the third quarter, and we ate up the entire third quarter with a drive, and we're fortunate enough to score, and keep them out of the end zone and win that game. And Jimmy did it on one leg, but I didn't want them to know that because they lost a player too. And it's just, those things come back to you years later. You think back and go, how in the heck did we do that?
Yeah.
But it's fun memories. We've had things where kids have left equipment at home, kids, bus trips. I forgot my helmet. I forgot my pants. You're wearing blue pants. Everybody else wearing white pants. You're wearing blue pants tonight. Those things, some great stories. Gosh, there's been so many that it's hard to count all those stories.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing. Those relationships you build, you're going to have them, right, forever and ever. And that's the other thing that's unbreakable when you've been doing this for 27 years.
Yeah, and actually, I think this is probably my 42nd or 43rd overall when you think about that. And 27 as a head coach, you just look back and you go, what in the world? Where did time go?
Right. Yeah.
When I started, Coach, we were 8mm. Had to drive Friday night to the bus depot so the film could get to Hastings and get developed so we could get it back Saturday for practice. And then we're VHS. We're scouting games every Friday or Saturday night. We used to play games on Saturday. So, it's changed so much in such a short period of time. It's just insane.
And I want to talk about some of those. Good segue in, but I also want to talk about Minter, so don't let me forget that. But let's talk about the change. One change that's come to college is NIL. And while it's come to college, I have to imagine there's kind of a trickle-down effect. Some of it good, some of it bad. But what have you seen from your perspective that has started to influence the high school game? Not necessarily the dollars, because that's at the college level. But what has been kind of the residual that's come down to the high school level?
Probably the biggest thing is it's a me thing, and I've got to get my highlights. Mm-hmm. It's about me and teaching the team concepts. And you know what? If we take care of business, you're going to show up on film, and they're going to find you. And I'm going to call, and I'll put calls out, and I'll tell them about you. But it can't be about you wanting the ball or you wanting this or you this. I said it's because without those other 10 guys, you aren't going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that part of it has changed a ton. And so I'm constantly, walking kids, back off the mountain saying, you know what, you got to be a part of the team first and everything else will take care of itself.
Do you think it's harder today?
Oh, it is definitely harder. And then when you start throwing in Nils, I haven't had that many kids about the Nils, but that aspect of it now, what about my money? What's going to happen? What do you got to give me? And what's, that it totally changed. As I said before, Florida just passed a bill that said they can have NIL money in high school. And it's a can of worms. And I don't know that it's a good can of worms. I think it's something that somebody's got to get a handle on, because the people that have a lot of money are going to get all the players. It's going to be the have and have-nots. And years ago, somebody told me there was going to be 4 super conferences, and everybody else is going to be on the outside looking in. Well, we're kind of moving that way now. And the college coaches that don't have that kind of money say, we don't even recruit kids like that, because they want that NIL, and we don't have it to give to them, so we can't even go after those kids. And so, what happens if you get a $5 million quarterback and your linemen are making only $5,000 a month or whatever? I mean, it's...
Yeah. One of the other things that may be coming here is if colleges only carry a roster of 85 players, which has been bandied about. No one knows the number, but let's say it's 85. The greatest irony, Coach, in my mind, is that NIL, yes, it's created financial opportunities for many, but it's also going to kill the dreams of many more. The walk-ons will probably not have the opportunities or the amount of opportunities. Is that ironic to you as well?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and I think when you think of throwing that whole COVID year and all those kids that get an extra year, the kids that graduated during that time, there wasn't any money for them. There weren't any scholarships, and I had one of the best quarterbacks around, but nobody said, we're full. We're not taking any quarterbacks. I got quarterback coming back. I got 2 quarterbacks coming back, or we're going to take one from the open
the portal there.
The portal.
Yeah.
We're going to take somebody there. So if your kid wants to walk on, and I said my kid is good enough to be a Division I scholarship kid. And I said, and you guys are telling me he's not any good, and you don't want him. And it was heartbreaking for my kids at that time, because those kids are saying, well, Coach, I don't know what to do. And I said, I can't tell you what to do. I said, if you can take a walk on, if we can find something. Fortunately, we found a spot for him, and he went down and had 2 great years and jumped into the portal now, and he was late getting the portal, and nobody wants him. I mean, you can get a walk on again, so he may be done, and he's an unbelievable talent. Yeah. So it's crazy how that whole thing is going to change.
Yeah. Now, here could be the upside. Are we going to see a small college boom? Because a lot of these walk-ons who might have bypassed a Wayne State or a Kearney or even an NAIA school are now going to have an opportunity. I mean, that level of football, if they go to a scholarship limit of 85 or 90, that could really improve the quality of football at those levels, too.
I had a number of kids last year even that are going to smaller schools. But the problem is tuition. I mean, when you're talking, $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, and you're only getting a $3,000 scholarship, makes it awful tough. So tuition is a big part of that. And a lot of my kids will say, well, I'm going to get $35,000, and 50 is what I'm going to have to wind up paying total. So it's going to cost me 15. So, I mean, we work numbers all the time with those things, and I talk to the kids about it. I said, listen, a $3,000 scholarship isn't really a scholarship. I said, when you're talking, $37,000 coming out of your pocket, I said, you got to be smart about what you're going to do. But I think we had 4 or 5, going to small schools last year. So, and they were able to come up with enough money to make it equitable for them. So you're right, that part of it's going to be there. But there again, it's a money issue.
One thing that hasn't changed with you, Coach, is 30, 40 years ago, players who are moving on really rely on their head coach for insight and some direction. And here you are still advising, right? Today, your players are coming to you. They're looking for that insight. That has to make you feel, awfully special that they're trusting you to get some feedback.
Scary
right?
too. That's the biggest part of it. That's why we do what we do. I mean, you want to have an impact, and if you can leave footprints in somebody's heart, then vice versa, they can leave prints in your heart. You've done a great service. And I think that's one of the things that you try and do, whether they're starters, whether they're backups, whether they're players that are never going to get on the field. But if you can build a relationship with those kids, I just ran into one at the hospital the other day. It was an EMT, and I had him in class, and and I didn't even recognize him, but they know you. Coach, hey, it's great to see you. And I said, you know what? I haven't changed as much as you have, help me. And so those things, and you'll get letters from kids, thanking you years later for the things that maybe you had an impact. You said something that had a lasting impression on them. And nowadays, I don't know that we can say enough. I mean, I had a student, and this isn't related to football, but wound up leaving my class on Friday and was dead on Saturday. And it's little things, and if you could do something to change that in some way and have an impact, I think we got to do our best to do that.
Right.
And you want to try and have that kind of a positive impact. There's so many other people out there that want to have an impact that maybe it's not always the thing that they need to hear.
Mm-hmm. Would you mind sharing one of the letters, maybe something that they reached out to you? You don't have to give me a name, but what's one thing that stood out to you?
One of the letters I got a number of years ago, there was we were going out to practice, and all my guys were on the fence, and they were cheering and screaming. I thought, what is going on? And so as I get down there was a fight down the valley below our football field. It was two girls, and one girl was just getting stomped. And I went down to break it up. They took off, and I went up and I just laid into my guys. I said, "Who's the leader?" I said, "Some girl was just getting pounded down there, and you guys were cheering like a bunch of idiots, and nobody cared that she was getting beaten, and you thought that was pretty cool." I said, "You're going to be the men. You're going to be the leaders of the future. So who are you going to be? You're going to be the guys that are standing around cheering, or you're going to be the guys that have an impact on somebody else's life?" Well, years later, I got a letter from one of my running backs. Said, "Coach, I never forgot that letter." And he said, or that chewing you gave us. Yeah. He said, I decided I want to have an impact from that point forward. And I set my life a course of that, trying to be a positive influence for somebody else and not being a spectator. I said, sometimes you got to get a little dirty, in order to get the outcome you want. But that was one letter. I mean, there was so many letters that you get that say some great things, but that one had an impact too.
That's worth it all, that coaching right there. Let's talk family. Your daughter, 2019, gets a head coaching job at Lincoln East.
It's scary.
She's following Papa along the lines of coaching. So first off, that moment in your heart, she's named the head coach at Lincoln East, a place that's obviously very special to you. I got to imagine you were melting just a little bit.
She's done a really special job, and I knew they wanted her, when she graduated down in Kansas, they wanted her to stay in Kansas, and I knew she was going to have an impact wherever she went. But fortunately, we had a job. She did her student teaching in Lincoln, and it was a job came open, and they snagged her, and so she's at East High, and she was an assistant for a year or two. And she'd been a club coach for a number of years and had a lot of success doing that. And then all of a sudden, that job opened up, and she was fortunate enough to get it. And she took them back to state, for the first time since she'd been there and played. And that was a huge accomplishment. I'm just as proud as I'll get out of her, because she's able to kind of carry on that tradition. And she's done an outstanding job.
Do you talk X's and O's? Do you
we
Thanksgiving? Do. I mean, did you probably didn't coach volleyball in your career?
Well, I know a lot about volleyball. Don't ask me.
I knew it.
And she was the first one to tell me. She said, "Dad, you're not my coach. You're my dad." Okay, so she put me in my place early, and so did my other daughter. And my other daughter hates it when we talk about X's and O's when she's there.
Yeah.
And so she always wants to do the lines at volleyball games, but whatever Nicole calls, my older daughter will give her that call. She goes, "That was out." She goes, "Oh, that was out." I said, "No, it doesn't work that way. You can't work the lines that way." So yeah, we do. We talk a lot of X's and O's, and when you have some of the same kids, you talk about the kids you have, and you talk about some of the girls she has, I have. Some of them are tracksters, some of them are not, and so there's a lot of the same kinds of issues we deal with, and so. I don't know. She's probably a lot better coach than I am that way. I mean, she's really rock solid with the kids she has.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, that's awesome, and I know how proud you are. And the one thing is, what I've learned from all coaches is how you have to have your family behind you, right? It's a great business. It's a rewarding business, but it's a tough business, right?
It really is.
From those kind of, those crazy parents and some other things that come up, right? You got to have that rock at home. And I got to imagine that family has been that rock for you.
Yeah. I mean, your wife, who has to be a coach's wife, and when you have kids and she's hauling kids and she's running them around and seeing things that I don't get to see because I'm coaching, and she's, my wife Kelly's been a huge part of that. She bought in, and she was the one, the sports mama that was, all over the country with my kids when they were in club sports. And I didn't get to see all those things, but she did. And you're right. I mean, it's a part of it. It's ingrained. I mean, and now, my grandkids are in the sports now, and it's the same thing. It's a family issue, and everybody's got to be on the same page that way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one more question before we get to something we call 3 and out. Every coach has some incredible superstitions, or I shouldn't say every. Most coaches have some crazy superstitions. Do you have any, or are you the exception?
I really don't have any.
You don't?
I really don't. I mean,
tell me about that. How did you miss it? Because most of these coaches are so neurotic. They got to wear the same clothes and this and that.
So I have assistant coaches that do that, so they'll wear the same clothing, same socks, same shoes. The hats. I never really. I think my faith has carried me to a position where it isn't about luck.
Yeah.
And that's not where I trust. And I don't trust in those types of things. And so it really hasn't, that's never been something that I've ever, ever done, because I think there's a higher power that's looking out for me, win, lose, or draw.
Right.
And so that part has never been an issue.
Yeah. Boy, you've saved yourself a lot of headaches, too. All right, let's go 3 and out. It's 1st and 10 here. These are going to be a little kind of wacky out there questions. I'll throw them out to you, and we'll see how you do. So 1st and 10, you get to be a teammate of any athlete. It could be a bygone era. Remember now, you're going to be fit here. You're back in your 18-year-old days. You are fit as a fiddle. Who are you going to be a teammate of? It could be a football player. It could be any sport, any era. Who's your teammate?
Julius Erving.
Philadelphia 76ers.
76ers. Yeah. I mean, and there's some great football players too, but as I follow Dr. J and the man that he is, gosh, what an outstanding person. And he was the first Michael Jordan. I mean, He was doing it. He carried the ABA, and they brought him into the NBA to do the same thing. Unbelievable, and just a rock-solid guy. It would be Dr. J. Yeah. I mean, I'd probably be feeding him. I probably wouldn't be doing the windmills, but he'd still be doing them.
I love that reverse.
Oh, my gosh.
The windmill? I mean, I don't know how he got his arm.
I don't know how he did it. I don't know how
Yeah.
he did it either. I mean, that's freakish.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's just the athlete he is.
I love it. Yeah, great choice. All right, here we go. Tailgate food. You have got to set up a tailgate food. What are 1 or 2 staples that has to be at a tailgate?
Well, and this goes back a long ways now. The hot dogs they used to have at Tasty In and Out.
Oh.
You remember that place?
Oh,
Tim?
yes, I do.
Okay, with a little bit of chili and sweet sauce. I mean, those things. Oh my gosh, I would die for those.
Those would be, yeah.
That would be at a tailgate, and I'd probably eat 40 or 50 of them back in the day. That would be something for sure that would have to be on, and potato salad.
Yeah. What about the onion chips?
Oh
yeah.
Deadly.
I mean,
that's probably why I had my first heart attack. I ate so many of those when I was a kid, and those are terrible for you. But ugh.
Oh, good times. Oh, yeah. That was
Most people have no idea what we're talking about right now, buddy.
I still believe it might have been the first ever drive-through, even before McDonald's.
And it was on the back side, the wrong side.
Yeah, yes.
It was on the passenger side
That's
when you
right.
drove through. And so I always had to lean across or have a shotgun rider.
Well, you're going to love this last one. We got now 3rd down and 3, so we got to convert, Coach. Listen, I know, NIL, not a big fan of, but I got to ask you this. You are now getting an offer from the University of Alabama, and they say you want any NIL deal you want. Again, you're 18 years old. What's your NIL deal?
Jeez, man, back in those days, probably Stetson hats.
Oh, they'd have a bunch of them, wouldn't they?
Wouldn't they have a bunch of Stetson hats? And I'm thinking,
10
know what?
gallon.
10 gallon. And I'm going to tell you a story. Thinking of that, Alabama, when we were in high school, We got on the phone and we called Alabama, and we got Coach Bryant on the phone talking to us when we were in high school. Unbelievable. We were on a payphone in the. I don't know how we did it. We called. We said we need to talk to Coach Bryant. You know, I'm so and so. I'm a player in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we got him on and we talked to him. Unbelievable. And most people wouldn't believe that story today.
How was
but
he?
It was,
How was
he was great. Well, y'all got to go to school and get your grades. And if you think you can play for Alabama and the Tide, then we're going to roll. And you know, that Nebraska program is pretty good up there. It was great. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Love it. That is a classic.
It is a classic. That is something. I totally forgot about that till you brought up Alabama. But yeah, that was one of the crazy things we did. And we got him on the line. And that was pretty neat.
Coach, you've had an incredible career. You've got a lot more great years ahead of you. I love these stories, and I think what is most important that you know, and I think you already know this, is the impact you've had in so many lives. And so as a former guy that played sports in high school, I know how important you coaches are. So anyway, thank you for all of that, and thanks for being on this. It's been a blast.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's always fun. It's fun to reminisce and talk about the past. I don't think we do that quite enough. And when you think back at some of those things, and it's just memories come flooding back. And you think back to those days, and you don't really think about them all that often. And I think back, you know, Sam Yao, who was probably one of the greatest running backs in Nebraska history, and was offered. He had Oklahoma and Nebraska and UCLA, and had 3 offers to play football. And I remember we were playing Southeast my senior year, and Sammy was a year younger, and they punted to us. Sam was back deep, and and they were number 1 at the time we played them. And Sammy had broke it down the sideline, and I was one of the last guys there, and I had one of those blocks that you can just decapitate somebody in those days, you know, and they're not looking, they're looking at Sammy, and I sprung him. And to this day, I never got credit for doing the thing that I did. He was super state, got all the accolades, and one of those plays without me, Sammy, would just been another ugly little play that got smashed.
Yeah, where's the thank you note?
Yeah,
and
there's no thank you note from Sam.
Yeah, who's the guy on the, you know, everyone says it was a clip, but not everyone. 50% say it was a clip on the great Johnny Rodgers. A punt return. Who was that guy that had the last block? I'm not sure the block was deeded. But
no, but I mean, it was a bone
But
crusher.
that was you, right?
It was without a doubt. That was the kind of block it was. You know, years later, Sam did thank me. I mean, but Sam was the only one that thanked me on that. But that was, you know, it's the little people that never get the accolades.
I love it. Well, I know we could hear a lot more of this. This has been great. And truly, thank you so much for all you've done.
Oh, appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. You betcha. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks.